Shabbat Shalom, brothers and sisters. We are just going to share more of this Torah portion. Today's Torah portion is Wayera, which means He appeared. But right before we start, we will give you the invitation to subscribe so you guys can get most of the latest productions. We always working on what we can bring to the table as far as teachings so you guys can grow more and more. In this Torah portion, Wayera, we will talk about the works of our father Abraham. So it's very little known what our father Abraham did, but it's literally all over the scriptures. But what does it mean to have the works of our father Abraham? And we'll find out very, very soon. We are also going to find out the relationship that he had with his nephew Lot, and also we will have the connection between him and his son Yitzhak, and what is this has to do with our Mashiach Yahushua nowadays. So all these little nuances we will find out very soon. Let's jump into it. Now in this Torah portion, Wayera, we know that our father Abraham was visited by three visitors, three angels, three malachim. And let's find out exactly what happened. This Torah portion covers from chapter 18, verse 1, all the way to 22, verse 24. Wayera, which means he appeared to him, Yahweh, by the cedars of Moreh. He was sitting at the entrance of the tent when the day was warming up. Now let's find out first the cedars of Moreh. The cedars happens to be a huge tree that our father Abraham was under. And this tree happens to be one of those trees that you can actually see from miles. It was pretty big, it was pretty thick, and it was pretty humongous. Not only that, Moreh happens to be an actual character. He actually owned that place around it, and our father Abraham kind of like rented it. And Moreh happens to allow him to live there. Remember that our fathers, and let me pause here for a moment. Remember that our fathers were nomads. A nomad is that he moves from one place to another place. He could be there for a month or months or maybe days, and he can pick up and leave and go somewhere else. That's what a nomad is. Our fathers were nomads. And one thing about our fathers, book of chapter 11 of Hebrews says by emunah, by steadfastness. And also it says that our fathers were nomads. They were sojourners. They set up their tent and they move on. And it's the same thing of our daily lives. We are sojourners in this world. We are visitors. We just visit in this world. Why? Because we are heading towards the Olam Haba, which is the everlasting life. And we are not, let me put it this way, we are not settling for this secular world. Now, something that happened to our father Abraham is that he, in the middle of the day, right at noontime, he was going to visit and give him a great surprise, a gift for him, because right at that moment, there was 3 days that our father Abraham just had the Brit Milah, the circumcision. Let's find out Targum Yonatan, and the kabot, or the esteem of Yahweh, was revealed to him in the valley of Moreh. And he, being sick with the pain of the Brit Milah, which is the circumcision, sat down at the door of the tent in the fervor or strength of the noonday, which was literally a noontime. It is something that you have to understand. Those who have gone through circumcision on the oldest age, you understand what I'm saying, that on the 3rd day, that's what it actually hurts the most. Our father Abraham was in the same situation. He was literally 3 days right after that. We know for a fact that he his custom is that every time he received visitors, he attend them, he take care of them like like no one else. And that's the way he passed it on through his relatives, including Lot, his nephew. Now, before that, let me jump into this verse. Let's go into the book of Yasher, chapter 18, verse 1. And Abraham arose and did all that Yahweh have commanded him, and took the men of his house and those who brought with their money, and circumcised them as the masters have commanded him. So it's something that we have to take in consideration, is that if we remember last week's Torah portion, we talked about how Abraham had 318 men that not only were warriors, but they were faithful to the Torah. They were Talmidim, they were disciples of Father Abraham. He raised them from they were little, and they knew Torah. And of course, the male ones, he circumcised them. It is amazing how faithful these men were in the house of Abraham. But we have to understand something very important, because jump into 18 verse 2. And there was no one else left whom he did not circumcise. That means he circumcised all of them. And Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised in the flesh of their foreskin. Ishmael was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. All this is what our father Abraham, Avinu Abraham, did because he loved Yahweh. He loved pleasing our Creator by doing the action deed. See, we talk too much, we say a lot of things, but at the end of the day, what the works and the action, the deeds, is what it counts. You can talk to talk, but walk to walk as well. And that's what our father Abraham did. Now, all this, let's jump into chapter 17, verse 10. Look at what it says here, and it goes hand in hand with the book of Yasher. Here is my berit, my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you, and your set out or generation after you throughout the generation. Every male among you shall be circumcised. Thou shalt be circumcised in the flesh of thy skin. These will be the sign of the berit, or the covenant, between me and you. So all this, once again, it is something that we have to take in consideration, how our Avinu Abraham did want to follow through to the letter, how to do the Torah to the very, very least. Now, there is something that I want to acknowledge as well. See, our father Abraham did what he needed to do, but at the same time, you have to understand that he, being the father of all of us, has to give a better or amazing example for us to follow. See, all of us, we always wonder what kind of works our father Abraham did. And we'll find out next. And this is kind of like one of the examples, because you have to understand this. In order for us to love our Creator, is because we tend to mix things in the Torah, in the scriptures. One thing is to love Yahweh. Loving Yahweh, it has a lot to do with doing the action. In other words, being obedient. Yahweh says this, then you shall do it without any questioning. Abraham did the same. See, one thing you have to understand, the love to one another, it has a lot to do with your emotions. But when it comes to loving Yahweh, it has a lot to do with your obedience. And that's exactly what our father Abraham did. chapter 18, verse 20 of Genesis, or Bereshit, Yahweh said, they cried against Sodom and Gomorrah, or Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin is so serious. And the reason why the Torah speaks about this is because we need to make it clear nowadays that we tend to think that every time we talk about Sodomites, or somebody who's a Sodomite, is someone who's a homosexual. It is true, but it isn't. We tend to think that was a great sin, but it's not. It was part of it. The book of Yashar says very clear that among being that kind of people, they were also very lascivious, and these people they give their neighbor their basically their kids, their children, their girls, boys, doesn't really matter, to enjoy themselves, and they picked a day once a year. And not only that, they also were very gluttonous. They were exalted themselves like they have everything, almost sort of like United States. And not only that, they also distill the people who came to their city. There's strangers, people who are sojourners and passing through. They robbed them, and they left them with nothing, with no food, no nothing, to starve literally to death. And not only that, that was basically the law there. And if you were against that, they would literally take you to the court, and the judges will favor the aggressor. Do you imagine that? It's almost like today, this judicial system is basically the same thing, not only here in the United States, but also around the world. And it's exactly what was going on in these 5 cities. We tend to think that Sodom and Gomorrah was only 2. It happens to be 5 cities because the Torah speaks about them. Now, let's continue with this. Ezekiel 18, verse 7, look at what it says. You can read the whole chapter, but here it says very clear that the tzaddik, the just, the righteous, supposed to do this. The man who oppresses no one, but returns the debtor his pledge, who does not commit theft, but gives his lechem, or his bread, to the hungry, and covers the naked with clothing. You see that? There is something how the Torah speaks about this that you ought to do. But look at what it says here, chapter 19, verse 1 of Bereshit, or Genesis. The 2 malachim who came to Sodom that evening, when Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom, Lot saw them and got up and greeted them and fell on the ground. See, that was the custom of Lot. Lot was not just, doing the same and going along just like the whole city, rob them and steal them and leave them without no clothes. But rather, he invited them to their house and did the opposite. He did exactly what he was taught by his uncle Abraham. The custom of our father Abraham was basically the opposite of Sodom and Gomorrah was. Yet, Lot saw these malachim invite them, and he actually forced them to come to their house so he can do basically welcome with open arms. Chapter 19, verse 2, he said, "Look now, my masters, please come to your servant's house, spend the night, wash your feet, get up early, and go on your way." "No," they replied, "we will stay on the square." See, they were trying to test Lot to see whether or not he was going to bend his knees. But no, he insisted them, and he actually brought them home. And exactly what Father Abraham did. 16, verse 46, look what it says here. "Also your older sisters, the Shamram, or Samaritans, who live to your left, she or her sisters, and your young sister who lives in the right hand is Sodom with her daughter." Verse 49, your sister Sodom's sins were pride and gluttony. Do you see that? She and her daughters were idle and self-indulgent, so they did nothing to help the child, poor and needed. You see what I'm saying? This was the, uh, of course, we always talk about homosexuality and so forth, but that was part of it. But one of the greatest sin besides that was also pride and gluttony and self-indulgence in idleness. They were doing nothing whatsoever, but they were doing the opposite. They were robbing the stranger and leaving the poor and needed completely alone. Look at what it says here. And this is talking about Ida, which happens to be the wife of Lot. He was a native from Sodom. He even tried to prevent her from entering the house. Lot's wife divided their house in two parts and said to her husband, if you want to receive them, do it in your own part. Lot wanted the masters of his household to participate on the meritorious acts of hospitality as Abraham had done. Do you see that? He asked his wife to bring them salt. She replies, do you want to learn the bad habits of Abraham? See, there is something that he learned from his uncle. A good deed is something we ought to learn. And it is something that is lost today. Question is, and I want to pause here for a moment, how do we greet the are we a good, in other words, host to your invites, to people who you invite with to your home? Did you clothe the needed? Did you give food to the hungry? It is something that even our Mashiach said to do. And look at what it says here right after they left. But before that, let me switch to this. 19 verse 14 of Genesis or Bereshit, Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-laws who had married his daughters and said, get up and get out of this place, for Yahweh is going to destroy the city. But his sons-in-laws did not take it very seriously. They thought he was a jokester, and they did not go with them. Now the question is, how many daughters Lot had? And based upon the evidence and the context of all this text, we happen to see that he more or less had about 4 daughters. 2 of them died in the fires of Sodom and Gomorrah, and 2 of them got out. 2 of them were married with their husbands, and 2 of them were engaged. The groom, soon to be husbands, both of them stayed in their city, and the other soon to be wives got out with the mom and dad, which happens to be Lot and his wife. That happens to be 4. The grooms left 4 behind, that's 6, and another 4 happens to be the 2 daughters and 2 husbands, that's 10. Do the math. If when Abraham was asking and pleading to spare the cities in plural happens to be 5 cities, one of them is spared later with Lot. I'm just fast forwarding all this. But remember when he got to, at the very least, happens to be 10 people, and he said, I will spare the city with 10 people. They were 10 people, but they were not faithful. That's the thing. 4 of them left, 6 of them died. Now, let's continue. Lot's wife, verse 26, looked behind and looked back, and she became the pillar of salt. The same salt she asked for the neighbor, same salt that she became. a sulfur, in other words. But we have to understand something very important, and we have to understand why is it that she looked behind? Why is it that it made her to look behind? We need to ask that question, and there is the answer. The book of Yasher, chapter 19, verse 51, exactly what we're talking earlier. Then Yahweh rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah and upon all these cities brimstones and fire from Yahweh of the Shemaim or heavens. And he overthrew the cities and all the plains and all the inhabitants of the cities in which they grew above the ground. And Ado, which happens to be Lot's wife, looked back to see the destruction of the cities, for her compassion was moved, look at what it says in red, by their daughters who remained in Sodom, because they did not go with her. You see that? So, more, like I said earlier, it was more than two daughters that Lot had. Now, let's move on. And let's close with this. When all this happened, we know that we already know basically the situation and the answer why she looked back. But let's fast forward a little bit more, and I do want to talk about the Akedah. Akedah means the binding of the ice or Jitzak. Chapter 22, verse 11, Wayera, that means called Malach of Yahweh from the Shemaim of the heavens. Abraham, Abraham, he replied, here I am. This happens to be when Abraham went up to the mountain Moreh, and he was going to sacrifice Yitzhak. But the Malach or messenger of Yahweh hold him. But I want you to see something that is encoded here, and I want you to see something that you might or might not ask yourself in the past. In the Brit Hadashah, in the renewed covenant, Mashiach was asked, how do you know Abraham? You're not even 100. And Mashiach says something that it has a lot to do with our father Abraham. And we always wonder what he meant by that. Where is in the Torah about that? And here it is. It is encoded in the Torah. It is encoded for us to understand why the Mashiach said those things. Now we will find out where it is encoded. Let's go back. 22 verse 12 of Bereshit Genesis, he said, don't lay your hand on the boy. Don't do anything to him, because now I know that you're the man that is afraid of Ayil Almighty. For the love of me, you have not withheld your beloved son. For the love of me, you not withheld your beloved son. This is a remarkable statement that Yahweh said to Abraham, the love of me. What kind of love is he talking about? As I stated earlier, the love of Yahweh has nothing to do with your emotions. Yahweh doesn't really care about that. What he really cares for you and I, it is your obedience, our obedience as sons and children of Ayil O Yahweh. He demands our obedience. The love for Yahweh is based upon that. And overthrew or overcame the love of his beloved son, which has a lot to do with emotions. You see that for father and son. He overcame more than that, which is the love of Yahweh, which is very, very important. And our Mashiach said it very, very straight to our faces. If you love me, keep my commandments. You see that? It has nothing to do with your emotions, but rather more about your obedience. Now let's go back and look at what it says here. Verse 13, Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and there behind him was a ram caught in the bushes by his horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered him as a burnt offering in the place of his son. Now, there's something remarkable in this verse that we need to decode. If you guys remember and look in this verse, Abraham was about to do this, but right behind him was a ram caught in the bushes. Now, before we decode this, I do want to state something similar to this. Remember when Abraham wanted to and asked to see the kabod, the steam of Yahweh. And Yahweh said to him, you cannot see my face because no one can see my face and lives. But rather, you can see, in Hebrew says, my backs, in plural. Not my back, but my backs. And it happens to be that the word achar means future. Okay? In other words, what Moshe was granted to see as a prophet was the future of all Israel, including our Mashiach. Now, if we go back here, the same situation with Father Abraham. Behind him was a ram. What is the word behind? And what is the word ram? Very, very interesting. Let's go back. If we decode this, we know that our father Abraham was just about to do this act of obedience, but right behind him was a ram. Let's go decode these two verses. The word achor means back, future, okay? And look what it says here in reality. And let's decode this. Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behind, or behold, he was an ayil. Ayil means not just a almighty, but a ram also as well. So right behind him was Ayil, Almighty. Who was Ayil? It refers to a Mashiach. And look what it says here. In the achar, in the back, in the future. In other words, he looked at the future, and that future happens to be the Mashiach. How do we know this? Because the scripture talks about, but let's look at this verse first. Look at the verse on the Targum Yonatan, on the Aramaic version of this verse. Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, a certain ram that had been created between the night of the foundations of the world. Does it ring any bells to you? Exactly. We're just about to go there. Was held entangled in a tree by his horns. Abraham went and took him and offered him as a place of his son. It's amazing how this verse is decoded, that this ram was created between the evenings of the foundations of the world. Once again, does it ring any bells to you? And it does. And exactly what the book of Revelation says. Revelation 13 verse 8, and all who live on earth who worship him except those who belong to the sacrificial lamb and from before the foundations of the world. You see that? And it's exactly what the Mashiach is, from the foundations of the world. Now let's go back what I said earlier about Mashiach stating what the Pharisees told them. And look what he replied was. John 8:56. Abraham, your father, you rejoice, and he will see my day, and he saw it. You see that? And he rejoiced in it. What day was it? The day of the Akedah. The day when he bind Yitzhak to be sacrificed. And who was the ram? It was the Mashiach. He was able to see the Mashiach. And you see that? And he rejoiced because he was the Lamb of Yahweh. It is very amazing, brothers and sisters, how the Creator see everything around our lives. He foretells all this for us to understand how amazing our Creator is, nowadays, and it has been since day one. It is our call to recognize our Mashiach and to not deny our Mashiach, because he is the key for our salvation. He is the key of Israel. He is the key to redeem all Israel from the very beginning of creation. I'm Moreh Rapha'Yah. We'll see you next time. If you haven't subscribed, please do so, and we'll see you next time. Shabbat Shalom.
Again.
Toda Rabba. If you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. There's more content in production. Thank you.